Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined today by Steve Bowling and Imran Khan of Kinda Funny Games to give our spoiler-free thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. But don't worry, we'll be talking all about spoilers and the future of the remake in the future discussion. For now, what did you think of the remake? Imran?
I ended up really loving the game. I think it's genuinely one of the best games I've played in the 30 plus years I've played video games, and that is not a small order. It's hard to say exactly why it hit me that hard, but it's one of those games that I think I'm going to remember for a very, very long time.
That's really impressive, actually, to put it up that high, because I'm not even sure. I need to process it a bit more to see if I'll put in that upper echelon. But I'm very satisfied with the remake. And Steve, what about you?
I really like the remake. I definitely don't think I'm placing it as high as Imran. For me, Final Fantasy VII, the original, was one of the most impactful games I've ever played. And that the original is probably right up there in my top 10 of all time. But I don't think that the remake has what it takes to kind of remain in my memory for decades to come. I love the game, and it's absolutely fun. And I think they did a great job respecting the source material. It's a great game, but not one that I think is going to stay. I don't think it'll reach that top 10 status for me.
It's hard to reach that for me personally, just because Final Fantasy VII was my first RPG. It's, that thing that got me into the genre, starting with PlayStation 1 and just devouring every RPG I could get my hands on at the time. So to have that kind of effect is nearly impossible. That being said, I can almost see 7 Remake being kind of this augmentation to the original, like playing the original and having that extra characterization that it provides and really getting more out of it that way.
There's some degree, I think, of course correction for it, because like in the context of when Final Fantasy VII came out, I had liked previous Final Fantasy games, so when it was this thing of all these other people are getting into this series that I was already into, getting into a genre I was already into, when this thing, like, as a baby Nintendo fan, there was the presumption of betrayal in the way they moved it over. Like, I loved the game a lot when I was a kid, but I don't think I realized how much I loved it until Remake reinforced that for me.
It does do a really good job of that, because you get to these moments it's like, oh yeah, this thing, and seeing it reimagined for the remake, and it just kind of blows your mind how they take these set pieces and just expand upon them, and creatures too, like seeing certain monsters really put a smile on my face and just made me so excited, like, oh, I'm here for this.
I think Wall Market was probably my biggest aha moment with the remake, where I just kind of felt like it felt incredibly familiar. Like, this is how I imagined Wall Market was from all those pre-rendered backgrounds that we ran across back in the 90s. Places like the Honeybee Inn are definitely not like 4 rooms you can go into. They, you imagine that if they were real, they'd be much bigger and more grandiose. And I think the remake does a good job of making them feel the way we kind of imagined they were. I never had any disconnect with the game where it was just like, oh, this doesn't match what I imagined, because the PlayStation game is, by today's standards, primitive. It does leave a lot to the player to kind of put pieces together in their mind as to how this world exists. And for me, I saw a lot of stuff that I really, really liked. And in terms of monsters, I think my favorite moment was there's one quest where you end up fighting a Tonberry.
Yes.
And I freaking loved it. Like, I mean, I felt like I was overpowered the whole time for this fight because I did it on a second playthrough. And yet, one stab from the little guy, and it came just from me being overconfident and trying to wail on him. But once he stabbed me and I went down, I was like, yeah, this is great. This is absolutely perfect. They nailed it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I freaked out when when a Tonberry showed up when I was fighting the fat chocobo. I was like, oh god, they're in this game? And, then there was the mention of like, oh yeah, that creature you heard in that one section. Yeah, that's a behemoth. I'm like, oh God. Like it really did emphasize those moments and make them big. And I agreed with you about Wall Market. That was huge, seeing it fleshed out in the way it was, how it's just this bustling nightlife and so much to see. Like I went through every inch of the Wall Market when I played it, just to see everything that there was, and there's so many fun little details. They brought back the shop where it just has the machine gun shoot at you.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That was the part of the game for me where, like, I've put 95 hours in this game by now. I've platinumed it. I would say at this point I'm done, but I still don't actually know my way around Wall Market. I can at some point see places around, like I have landmarks and be like, okay, now I know where I'm going. But there's so many alleys in there that I've probably explored but have not internally mapped out in any way.
Yeah, I've played through it quite the Wall Market section specifically, just because I was trying to go for all the dresses for that trophy and to show them all off for one of our videos. And I know the main streets, but all the little side alleyways and all that stuff, it's just like, oh God, where am I again? And then I find myself back on a main way, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm good.
There's actually like a little clever bit of design there. It's like, I don't know exactly how they're doing this. I assume they're just playing a MIDI track underneath the main track, but in different sections of that area, they change the music to, like, if you go to the massage part of the area, it's like a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, more Eastern sounding version of that music. Mm-hmm. So you can tell which neighborhood you're in based on just how the music is. That helps you find your way around, which is like extremely well done for forward thinking for a game like this.
Absolutely. It really just lends that flavor to it. And it's really how I felt like one of the things I was most excited about coming into this game was just seeing Midgar more fleshed out. Because you remember, Midgar is so memorable from that original game, but you really don't get to see much of it. Like, the first time I played, and granted I was new to RPG, so it wasn't all clicking for me at the time, was, oh right, there's an upper plate where people live, and they're all well-to-do, but you don't really see that outside of when you leave the initial bombing mission. And to see more of that, to see the effect of the bombing mission, and then get into slums and just see how bad it is for people, and even just how different the slums can be between Sector 5 and Sector 7 is really eye-opening, and I think just adds a lot of character to this game, which I think is where it almost excels the most, is that characterizations of everybody is just off the charts.
Like Aerith and Tifa, I think, are like the big ones, but I mean everyone, honestly, Barrett, Jesse, all of them, they were very 2D in a lot of ways in Final Fantasy VII. And you can definitely see the personalities the writers were going for, but bad localizations and just the writing of the time and all that sort of jazz, it made it so they were characters of the times in most ways. This one, they feel like fully fleshed out, interesting characters that are both likable and sympathetic in a lot of interesting ways.
Mm-hmm. There's one character moment with Aerith that immediately made me fall in love with her, and it's soon after you reunite with her at the church. You're walking across the rooftops and exploring and talking. It's just this nice banter back and forth between the two. And I think Cloud asks at one point if she needs any help, and she's like, I don't need to be cuddled, and she's climbing a ladder at the time, and it breaks, and she just gives this little shit and jumps on. It's like, it really just emphasized like that more tomboyish quality to Aerith that showed that, yeah, she's cute and helpful and likes to make everybody happy, but there's a feisty side to her, and it really emphasizes that.
Yeah, that conversation is like Cloud very subconsciously tries to keep putting her in her place by saying things like the monsters tend to go for the weaker prey. So when they do come out and attack Aerith, she makes a joke about it, like, these must be a new breed of monsters because they went for the stronger prey this time. Like, she gives Cloud shit, which is not the way her like they've played her or written her in subsequent things like Kingdom Hearts and stuff like that. They made her more shy and demure in other Final Fantasy appearances. In this one, she's back to just being like a tomboy firecracker.
Yeah, like, I think he has one line during battle where it's like, stay behind me, of course I'll watch your back, that type of thing, where it's just, he, as you say, he tries to put her in her place, and she's like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
For me, my favorite characterization was actually Cloud. I don't remember liking him very much in the original, and I like him a lot more here. I feel like he has a lot more motivation to do the things he's doing. Whereas in 7, and I haven't replayed through the original probably in at least a decade at this point. I like to go back and play chunks of it every couple of years or so, but I never find the motivation to play all the way through. And so maybe my memory's a little bit hazy, but I remember Cloud as being a lot less fleshed out than he is in this version. And I kind of feel like, in a way, even the side quests kind of help me to understand why he even comes to terms with, helping Tifa and life in the slums and getting wrapped up with Avalanche, because to me it felt more like it kind of came out of nowhere before. Whereas in this one, you can kind of see how doing things for people and even the increased amount of interaction and dialogue he has with the other members of Avalanche kind of nudges him in the direction of helping Barrett out with the cause. And I like that. I like how I feel more like connected to Cloud earlier on in the game than I did with the original.
They give him enough little moments where you can see him connecting with the other characters, or, trying to have this excuse of all about the money and trying to play the hard ass. But they keep cracking him. They keep finding ways of making him actually care and breaking that veneer, which is genuinely fun to watch, especially him and Barrett trading barbs, him being a little softer to Tifa. Like, he looks up to Tifa. You can, he doesn't try to do the protective thing with it that he does with Aerith. Aerith, he just gives, these little tips to Tifa, and she's like, yeah, I got it. And Aerith, he's more protective. It's really subtly done, which you don't see too often. There's a very clear difference between the Cloud at the beginning of the game to the end of this game.
Absolutely, and I really like the dialogue that Cloud shares with his allies during and before and after battle. Like you guys were mentioning with Aerith, the dialogue he has, with her, but he does that with everybody. And like you mentioned, Derek, his dialogue with Tifa, I think, is really good too. It stands out. He'll compliment her form in battle and tell her, that she's doing a great job and stuff like that. Or she'll remark that, she's amazed at how well a soldier can fight and stuff like that. I really like those little micro interactions that they have when they're fighting.
What'd you guys think of the characterization they gave Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse? Because I knew they would get a little bit more screen time, but the fact that we got backstories for both Jesse and Biggs, and Wedge, the comic relief character, got a hero moment in it. That's great.
They leaned a little hard on the fat jokes for Wedge.
They did.
Not even, and a lot of that was just, at some point it was just repetitive. It's, okay, yeah, we get it. Everyone, that's what they think is funny. But beyond that, I thought it was really well done. I saw a lot of people complain about how they don't like Jesse's characterization as, what's the word you would use for it? Just horny for everybody, I guess. But,
but they also make it a point that she's not actually. She's playing with you.
For her, it's all a game. Yeah. Which I think it works out fairly well. And especially, knowing all those characters from Final Fantasy VII, the time you have with them in that game, they were not fleshed out, and you don't end up feeling that much for them. In this one, when you do deal with all the things that Jesse, Wedge, and Biggs do, you have to, you do emotionally have a feeling, because Cloud is connected with them, and if they can break through Cloud's veneer, then they've broken through to the player as well.
For me, and I have to comment on this about Wedge, I was constantly distracted by Matt Jones's performance, because I couldn't unhear his character from Breaking Bad. All I could hear was Badger the whole time talking to me, and it threw me off, but I really did like how Wedge, the comic relief, got to play a pretty important role, and I thought that was pretty cool that they gave these characters more of a reason to exist, because they definitely all felt like throwaway characters before, and I like the fact that there's some depth to them this time around.
Mm-hmm. They originally felt like they were in the game, so the game could use the Star Wars references, and now they feel like characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's step back from this more story and character related stuff, because I feel like that's better served for spoilers when we can go all out and talk about them. Let's jump into the gameplay, because that surprised me the most. I was hooked on the gameplay ever since I got to play the E3 demo last year. That demo was enough to be yes, I like this. It's really good, but I want more. Having that more, seeing how it evolves and changes and really becomes tactical as you go on, was a real highlight for me. I love this battle system.
Similarly, I played the E3 demo last year as well, and I came away from it I love that battle system, but I thought the Scorpion boss just took so long. I didn't understand what the problem was, because at the time I thought I understood the battle system. What I did not understand was that every single boss, enemy, whatever, every combat scenario is its own puzzle. And the game is about taking what you're solving from those puzzles and applying it to the what you're fighting next. So it wasn't that I was doing it wrong necessarily, I just wasn't doing it right. And understanding how the Scorpion boss actually worked, what I was supposed to actually do with the weak points and all that jazz, was not stuff even I understood when I first brought the retail game and started playing that. I honestly don't think I really understood the battle system until maybe the end of my second playthrough on hard mode.
I think the battle system clicked for me sometime around... Well, an aspect of the battle system really clicked for me during the Reno fight in the church. Mm-hmm. The fact that if you're gonna stagger him, you need to learn how to guard.
Right.
Like, that was paramount. And that felt really good to me when I figured that out and got that aspect. And then you play a little bit further and you figure out, like, oh, I really need to be swapping around and getting these characters. Like, oh, Tifa's good for building up the stagger. Barrett's great for long distance. Aerith is all about that magic. And Cloud is just brute force. And learning how to utilize each of them as you go along and figure out the best materia setup for your characters really felt satisfying.
I did not figure out how to increase stagger percentage for a very large part of the game, but once I did, that really opened up a lot of possibilities of how much damage you can deal, and it turned like some 10 to 15 minute boss fights into like 5 minutes.
The way I only know it for now is just Tifa's True Strike and using her special things. I know Aerith's one beam attack
Ray of
also
Judgment,
raises. Yeah, Ray of Judgment also increases it. I don't know about any of Cloud's. All I know is that I basically used Focus Thrust as much as possible to raise that stagger meter, and then if I had enough ATB, use Infinity's End for massive damage, or Triple Slash to just get in as many strikes as possible.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way it works. Like, if it then becomes sort of an order of operations thing of like, okay, I've staggered him, immediately hitting X, and then trying to basically arrange an Advance Wars style strike of all the things you need to do right now in the first second of that enemy being staggered in order to get, like, say, Barrett's maximum fury to unload completely and do the amount of damage it needs to do, or to have all the people release their limits at just enough time to do all the maximum output of damage.
Mm-hmm. It is so satisfying when you have multiple limit breaks and you can unleash them all at once. Simultaneously, not always the best idea to do that, because a lot of bosses, like, you hit their stagger point and it's basically, oh, time for the next phase of the fight.
Right.
And you lose out on those limits. Like, no.
Like you, Derek, I think you and I played the E3 demo like within a day of each other. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with the battle system immediately. Like, I knew this was something I really liked. From the first time I went hands-on with it, I knew it was something special. It reminded me of, like they fixed every complaint I personally had about Final Fantasy XV's battle system. The moment that it clicked for me was I was going back through VR battles, just trying to figure out the battle system a little bit more, and I settled on Fat Chocobo because he was kind of like a damage sponge and one of the easier ones to fight, and I kept going through it just trying to figure out how to break things down. And it was when I figured out how to get stagger up past 200%, because I was working on that battle intel. And once I got that going, and like Imran said, I started to dive deep into the strategy of how to just maximize my damage output for all three of my characters. I had Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett, and I had Tifa just charging up her chi with what is it?
Unbridled
What's the
strength.
Yeah, Unbridled Strength.
Yeah, Unbridled Strength. So I didn't realize you could even stack that. So I would do two of those, then I'd have her wail on Fat Chocobo after he was already staggered, and that would make a huge increase. And then I would use True Strike and keep chipping away, getting his stagger up. And before I knew it, like, getting him all the way up to 300% was a breeze. And once you had him there, he was basically dead.
Yeah.
And so I started to realize I can go apply those same tactics to literally anybody, and it makes the game, I don't want to say easier, but it changed my approach from thinking of it more as an action game to getting more deeply tactical about how I fought enemies. Even though it feels like an action game, that core RPG feel of having to put a lot of thought behind your approach to different enemies is very much alive and well in the remake, and I just love that. I think it's great that they somehow managed to perfectly merge an RPG, or a traditional RPG style system, and an action game together. And they both feel perfectly at home.
Yeah, like, they're all puzzles. Puzzles is like the best way I would know how to put it, because like one of the bosses, for example, requires you to constantly hit it with different kinds of elements, and if you're not coming in there prepared with all those elements, then it becomes you can't really solve that puzzle. So there's nothing there that's exceptionally difficult on a normal playthrough. Like, you'll be put on your heels, but you can usually brute strength your way through anything. But to be able to solve it and do it quickly is a decent bit harder and requires a decent bit more mental acuity.
Mm. And the great thing is you're not, like, ranked, so it doesn't really punish you. It's just a matter of saving time. And there's a lot of elements, like, when I first encountered them, I was like, I don't really think I need this. Like, the issuing orders to your teammates. Mm-hmm. I didn't really use that at first. Like, I used it a little bit, but it didn't seem like that major of a thing. And then I realized that mainly enemies attack who you're controlling. And that's, if you want to use spells, that's not good, because those spells can be interrupted, and that is heartbreaking when it happens, especially when you're trying to heal. So never have your spellcaster be you. Issue those orders, but sometimes you have to switch to them just to build up their ATB faster, so you can use those spells or what have you. And I like that balancing act between having to control them and actually issuing orders so you can take advantage of all your spells and abilities.
Yeah, early on I was all Cloud all the time unless I had to switch with like Barret, but by the end of the game, like by the end of my actual playthroughs, I was switching probably I would do an action switch, do an action switch. So I would say like a good 2 or 3 minutes of every battle was just the camera zooming between things for me.
That's awesome. What'd you guys think of the weapon system they had in place here? Because that actually surprised me, how each weapon had its own ability to learn and basically a skill tree as you leveled up and had more abilities, so that really by the end of the game, once you max out all the weapons, they can have, I'm pretty sure every single one of them can have the max 6 slots for Materia and have them all connected. It's just a matter of how you spend your SP. And it really comes down to what's your strength and weaknesses that you want to be. Do you want more magic? Do you want more physical? Do you want higher defense? Do you want this ability for it? What do you want? And I really like that idea.
It's a really cool idea, and it makes it so that you can make builds out of this thing versus just, this weapon's gonna... By the end of the game, by the end of the hard mode, I was using the Braver Sword, because it just had the stats that were better for Cloud. But it didn't have all the skills, so I would occasionally still have to switch back to a different sword. So it made it so I'd have to actually be aware of what all these weapons actually did, but I didn't have to micromanage it if I didn't want to. I could... Like, for example, I know X sword will have Reprieve, which I'm going to need for this boss fight. But I didn't have to, go through individually through each one, leveling it up slowly, because it's just an automatic way to do it. But being aware of the high-level skills these weapons gave me made it so I could go in with different builds for different bosses, which made them all feel a lot more... It made it feel like it not spammy, like, say, a Kingdom Hearts might be.
Yes, it does not feel like Kingdom Hearts, because I took on some of the super bosses in Kingdom Hearts, did the DLC, and it's just a lot of mashing, and mash that attack button, try to guard, try to dodge, heal, repeat. Right. There's not too much thought. Granted, that's me being a plebe, but when it comes to Kingdom Hearts battles and those super bosses, but I could really feel the tactics and the necessary tactics in the 7 Remake. But I know that was actually a point of contention for you, Steve, in your review, where you weren't a huge fan of having to allocate until you realized that you could do it automatically.
Yeah, for me, I would go through and I was just playing the game, trying to get through the story, and then I'd remember oh man, I have, 20 or 30 SP that I can go back in and look. And I do blame part of that on the fact that I had to play through the game in 48 hours, but so I didn't get to play it at the pace that I would like to. But at the same time, I'm just not a fan of skill trees in general. I don't really enjoy going through those and spending my time in the game looking at those. So I really liked the automatic options, and being someone that was trying to get through, I was like, yeah, just give me the maximum attack on all these guys so that I can get through normal as fast as possible. And that worked out great for me. I think, like Imran said, I like the fact that if you want to go deep with it, you totally can. And but if you don't, you have that option. To me, more options are always a good thing. And it's not like you're locked in either way, because you can go to Chad Lee and just have him reset your weapon if you don't like how it was automatically set up for you. And I imagine that as I go to take on the super boss, I'm definitely going to need to do that and actually take the time and load them out in a specific way to get the abilities I need. But that being said, it's just not my cup of tea. Sitting there and going through and picking skill by skill by skill. It might be okay if you were dealing with 1 or 2 weapons, but when you're dealing with 5 or 6 per character, the tedium can set in real fast for me. It just wasn't my thing. But I'm glad that they have multiple options for people based on what your preference is.
Yeah, I didn't use Chadley's skill thing until the very end when I was working on bosses, and was like, okay, you got to figure out what works best and maybe focus on the later skills rather than the early skills. And I was shocked when I found out, it's only 100 gil to do that. It's nothing. Okay, they really want you to do this, and if you play through hard mode, that's how you get enough SP to basically have all skills on all weapons.
I was completely tapped out by the end of the game. So everyone had all their skills, and it was still a matter of like, okay, now I can just choose by whatever skills someone needs for a fight or what stats I just want to focus on.
Which is nice because then you don't have to worry about, oh, this weapon has 4 slots for materia, this one has 6, and if I'm going back and forth between the two, I gotta remember, like, okay, what was my setup? That was my issue a lot of the times when it came to switching between weapons. Mm-hmm. But speaking of the materia, they nailed it. I feel like they really made it like, okay, I want this type of materia, this works well for this character. Oh, we have this special ability? Sure, why not? And it feels like they all help you, and they're not all like repeats from the original game. Some are specifically used for this game, and I think it's so cleverly done.
Yeah, they managed to transfer a turn-based system in all its trappings, including like a magic stat building tree behind it, and turn it into like a mostly action system that feels like a turn-based system. It is no small task in any respect, and it's shocking how well they pulled all that stuff off.
Personally, I'm a big fan of the fact that they got rid of those buffs and debuffs that each materia had in the original game because, again, first RPG, I didn't really pay attention to it. It's like, oh, all the materia on all the characters, and didn't realize how much it was screwing up my stats. Still beat the game, but it was like, oh, if I want to do this smartly, I maybe don't have all the materia on there. Here, that's not an issue.
Right. Here, they do a pretty good job of, like, letting you just live out a fantasy, power fantasy, I guess, and just go with, because you need to move stuff around so often, and based on like what characters in the party, which aren't, you can't really have time to focus on the background of it. Especially if you just don't want to. If you want to, like, I just need to put lightning on Aerith because we're gonna go fight a bunch of robots, then that's a perfectly reasonable path to take.
I think it's really incredible that they managed to nail this so well, and even on top of that, bolting on new things that I didn't even know I wanted. Like, I love the fact that I can add materia slots to my weapon and link them and have all these special abilities on top of, the traditional system. And like you were talking about earlier, Derek, we have new materia that only makes sense for this new hybrid battle system. It's just dang impressive that they were able to make this feel so much like the original while it's just the underpinnings of a completely new system. I was initially wondering how well materia and all that would work because that's not part of the pre-release demos I got to play. The biggest change for me being I was a little thrown off when I found out that you could only have a single summon materia. Mm-hmm. I was hoping that, you just that they would have left that alone, that you'd just be able to summon. But when you look at how the summons operate, they're so much different, and if you were able to just summon whoever you want, whenever you want, it'd be incredibly overpowered. It would just destroy the balance of the game. Like, these summons are ridiculously powerful now.
It is. Summons are handled a little weird, though. Like, a third of the summons just can't be summoned in most places. Like, even places where you could summon, say, Shiva, you can't summon Leviathan because he's too big. So it is a little strange the way they did it. Like, it feels like a system that's meant for further games than it is just this one.
Yeah, there's a balancing act there, and I can sort of see why they need to work within the system. They don't want them clipping through everything. Though, to be honest, I really wasn't paying much attention to the summons after they were out there. It's like, oh, cool, I have enough ATB to use their special ability. Let's do that and have them unleash the pain as best as possible. But I did like the strategy of choosing which characters had which elements and which summons, and actually gathering them all. I don't think none of us got to try out the DLC summons, did we?
No, they did not come with my Square provided copy.
Yeah, same for us.
Yeah, I picked up a retail copy just because I needed to have like the physical Final Fantasy VII disc next to my original PlayStation copy. And I have the Cactar summon, but I have not yet even downloaded it. And I think that there's also a pre-order summon that you get.
The Chocobo.
I don't think I've even gotten the code for that.
Yeah, the Chocobo Chick, and I think the other one is Carbuncle.
Yeah. From what I understand, like, you can't use them before Chapter 2, at which point you get Ifrit, who is way stronger than them anyway. So they are very largely pointless.
I mean, Carbuncle usually just reflects things, and I'm not a big fan of reflect in the first place, because usually, like, I want to be able to heal my team. So not being able to do that kind of sucks. I learned that, again, the hard way back in the original game. It was like, I don't think I like this. But yeah, it's different, but for the most part, I like how they worked because, yeah, it kind of sucks that you can't summon them whenever you want. but they really do come out in the best times, where it's usually the big bosses or big elements, and you find out usually it's like after you stagger an enemy for the first time, or when you get really low on health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really liked how the remake handles letting you know that you're able to summon. Final Fantasy XV just felt like a mess when it came to summons. Like, it was always a mystery. So I like that, one, like, I know which characters are going to summon whom, and that I can choose when to tell them to do it. But I like even more that summon meter appears and lets me know that, you know, it's going to be available soon. So I can start thinking about how best to use it, or you know, even just saving ATB so that I can use those abilities as soon as the summon monster appears.
Yeah, there's some really smart play there, like Bahamut. I was like, they mentioned the thing with the abilities you can use with him, like stronger at this point. I'm like, what are they talking about? Because there's no option to activate this. And then I was actually seeing him in action. I'm like, oh, it's basically when he starts, his time starts running out, he gets this aura around him, and so you might actually want to save those abilities until he's about to leave, so you can do more damage with him and get better effects. It's like, again, there's these small little bits of strategy that pop up that make it feel very gratifying when you can pull it all together. Another thing I was pleasantly surprised about, the game has teeth. Like, I actually died a few times against just normal enemies.
It does, like, bosses can be relentless. Like, when you were on your back heels, it is very difficult to get back on. I don't think my number of deaths in normal mode were that high, but I never had to do a battle more than twice, because by the time I came back, I would be like, okay, I think I get it. I think I figured out how to solve this. Hard mode, I died to pretty much every major boss or fight at least once.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with you, though, Derek. It is far more difficult to me than the original was. There's a lot of challenge to this game. I actually really enjoyed, you know, fights where I'd get my ass kicked and then have to come back and regroup and figure out what I did wrong. Mm-hmm. Because they never, while they can be difficult, they seldom feel unfair. I think Kotaku posted a video on it. There's one fight where you're up against like 6 dogs in Hojo's lab.
Yeah.
And that one's a bit rough because you're with Aerith and Tifa. And I don't think that they're necessarily the best group for large packs of enemies. But other than that, I never really felt like I was completely outgunned. And even then, when you can find smart ways to work around that. Especially, you know, exploiting enemies' weaknesses. I would always use the analysis materia so that I could figure out weaknesses like right away and then start using them.
That one was that fight you mentioned was interesting because like that was one that was a huge roadblock actually for me in hard mode, because it's like I was legitimately concerned I couldn't get past that because I died 4 or 5, maybe 6 times to it. And then at some point I just said, what if I run backwards and just get a bit more space and then just start shooting both ice. I put ice materia on both Tifa and Aerith before that, and then just started shooting blizzard materia every time I got a single bar, and then I was able to do it. Because, okay, they didn't want me to handle it the way I handled it on normal. They didn't want me to just go in there and start punching and hope things work out for the best. They wanted me to actually solve what that scenario would be.
Yeah, and you can get that feeling quite a few times, like the battle at the top of the pillar. I really like that battle, and I don't think there's a spoiler to say, but the boss battle against Rufus, that really felt like a puzzle because it was just so different from anything else. Not necessarily hard. I never felt like I was in trouble during it, but very tricky in order to figure out his pattern and how to really take care of it. Like, Rufus got an upgrade.
Yeah. The assessment area is literally a riddle. It's like saying, if you use a certain move, then he's going to go, like, his stagger will go up. It's like, okay, so what do they want me to use? And so I ended up just thinking, like, okay, what would Cloud's, like, repertoire be at this point in the original? It turns out, yes, one of those moves was the one that did it.
See, I didn't think about that. I just, like, I basically waited until he reloaded, got a few shots in, and gradually built up my limit break, and then took care of him. So I did it the long way.
Again, you can brute force pretty much every fight in this game, but you don't have to, and that's one of the things that's much interesting about it, is that they made a game that, there are difficulty levels, but on normal, the sub-difficulty levels are, did you figure this out, or did you not yet?
Even beyond the battles, though, I was pleasantly surprised how many mini-games there were in this. Because that was a big thing for the original Final Fantasy VII. There's just so many different things to do, and they found a way to implement that with just this section. Whether it's the gym mini games, the box breaker, got a little bit more to do with the motorcycle. They're all really fun. I found like in mini games that you would not expect at all are in there, and I don't know, just really give a sense of life to the game.
In some ways, and I know this probably isn't true because, like you said, the original did have a lot of mini games, but in some ways, I kind of wonder if they were influenced by the Yakuza series, because it is a lot of those, like, it's the same darts mini game, it's the same, like, gym mini games, that sort of thing, just kind of sprinkled around an open-ish world, and it just reminded me so much of, like, okay, yeah, you could put Kiryu in here and it would feel roughly the same.
I've not played Yakuza, so that's really interesting. I heard I'd like the series, so I got to try it out at some point.
But like some of those minigames do get incredibly difficult. I think there's one with Tifa where you're doing pull-ups.
God,
and
yeah.
The pro version of that, which is necessary for a trophy, took me, I think, an entire morning of just trying to do that over and over. Because if you mess up once, you have to restart because you're not going to get it.
I think one took me about 30 to 40 minutes.
About the same for me. I was surprised. I saw a lot of people talking about how they bailed out on that trophy because it was so hard. And I was like, it was definitely really hard. And like Imran said, if you mess up even once, you're probably screwed and you have to start over. But it didn't take me too many tries. And I attribute that probably to the fact that I love wasting time on mini games. Because I really enjoyed it. The first thing I did in Wall Market was run over and go do the squats mini game, like as soon as I could. I was like, I need to see how this scene plays out in the remake, and it was perfect. I really enjoyed it. Another one that I wasted an insane amount of time on was the darts mini game at 7th Heaven. I wanted to get to the top of the leaderboards, and I didn't even know there was a trophy for it. I just felt like I had to do it.
Also, fun note, speaking of the squat mini game, the first or second guy you fight, compete against is Zach Aguilar, who is now he is in Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I guess also Smash Brothers as Byleth.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
I guess, was he the second guy you face?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, nice. That's really funny. Like, that's the other impressive thing about this game is just so much voice acting. Every line of dialogue is voiced. Every character is voiced. As you're going through just any area, you'll hear just random talks. And it changes, too. Like I said, I went for the dresses, and the people's reactions to Aerith's dress change depending on what quality you get.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much effort was put into that.
There's 3 different cutscenes for her introduction with the dress. Like, one, literally a red carpet is rolled out for her as people gawk, and one, like, a dog walks by and doesn't move, like, out of her way. Like, that.
Yeah.
It's weird how much, like, you could tell this is a game that the people who made it really loved Final Fantasy VII.
All the moments that you would hope would get the emphasis that you want, got the emphasis that you want, I feel.
Yeah.
I can't think of any that were left out.
Like, the production values on this game are way higher than I expected. I think we all knew it was going to be a really pretty game. Control-wise, it felt good at previews. But I didn't expect quite the level of detail we've gotten. Like you said, the multiple intros for the dresses. I went through the game with kind of a sense of disbelief over what I was playing. Like, I kept looking for holes. Like, I wanted to find something they missed, and I found nothing. Like, I remember being really impressed that, I went into one of the shops, and the shop and I can't remember what they sell there, because the only thing I ever remember about the shop in Wall Market is the guy's laying down.
Yeah.
And I expected that not to be there for some reason. It was there. I expected the sick guy in the bathroom not to be there. I expected not to have the choice of stairs or an elevator because of the dialogue that was originally included on the stairs. And they fixed that up and made it really funny. There wasn't a single moment where I wasn't impressed with this game. I think as an old school Final Fantasy VII fan, I feel like they did justice to the original. I mean, they made a lot of tweaks and a lot of changes, of course, but I never felt like there was anything that was left out. I don't know that I can think of anything that was left out, but I don't think anything happened in the game to make it feel lesser than the original.
That was the impressive part to me, is like every new thing that was added didn't feel like filler. Like they're just trying to kill time and build it up. Like each thing felt like it had a point, and some things got expanded upon, like the train graveyard. Did not expect that extra plot point to come up. That's interesting. It really gave more flavor to each of these sections. But you did mention trying to look for flaws, Steve, and the ones that keep coming up the most for me is a lot of those skyboxes, they can look impressive, but they also look really flat. And also there's some really, there's a lot of textures that take a little while to load in or just look low poly at points. Like, you could feel the PS4 struggling to keep up, even with the Pro, in a couple of these sections. It does a completely admirable job, and you can overlook it easily. But it does feel like, let's be honest, this is going to get a re-release on the PS5. They're going to tighten up those moments, is my guess.
Yeah, it's stuff like that, and it's stuff like having to squeeze through areas all the time because the PS4 just isn't good at loading texture. Like, no console this generation is really that good at, streaming textures as much as Final Fantasy VII wants it to. So, honestly, this game is, a really good advertisement for the PS5 and, the SSDs and stuff like that. Because I can't wait to I want to experience level design like this. They're probably going to keep a lot of that stuff in for next-gen ports and all that. But in future games, I want to squeeze through stuff less or, not take 6 seconds to pull down a lever.
I agree with that. When I was talking about looking for holes, I meant more from a narrative standpoint. There are definitely visual issues that you see from time to time, like texture pop-in or texture quality changes. I think I noted sometimes I'd walk up to a vending machine and it would be low quality for a full 10 seconds while I'm just standing there interacting with it, and suddenly it'd pop in at high quality. And like you said, Derek, some of those skyboxes do look pretty bad. I remember at a later portion in the game where I'm going through some ruins of Sector 7, and just you look in the background beyond you and you're like, wow, what resolution is that? What am I can barely make out what I'm supposed to be looking at. So there are some points where it's rough, but like you guys said, I feel like that's almost a glowing advertisement for the PS5. I imagine that this game has already been tested against a PlayStation 5 dev kit with, its impressive I/O and loading times. And I bet that you see fewer, if any, of those issues. But there were also weird parts, and I don't know if you guys experienced this, where I would go to talk to a character, and it very clearly needed to load that interaction, because Cloud would just stand around for a second, and I'd be like, wait, is it going to happen? Are they going to talk? And then it'd pop into the cutscene. But yeah, it would take a while for those to start on occasion.
There is one that's hilarious where a character is dangling off the side of a building and screaming for help, and all the other characters are gathered around him, but it takes forever to load in the cutscene. So it's literally just Cloud and group watching the character please help me, somebody pick me up, before anybody reacts.
Yeah, I didn't have something to that degree, but I did have another moment where it's when Cloud first sees Tifa in the Chocobo wagon and talks to her. After the conversation and she's going away and sitting back down in her seat, her hair's going wild. It was glitching out and just going all over the place. I was like, oh, that's definitely not intentional. Only happened that one time because I did that cutscene 3 or 4 other times trying to get all the dresses. But yeah, that was ooh, that's a little rough. Other big question. I had actually 2 points very close together where the game essentially froze up and won't let me do anything. I'm wondering if you guys experienced it too. It's in the Shinra building when you're going through the vents, and you can look at other people through the vent holes. And both instances before you get to the meeting room, and this is back in the original Final Fantasy VII, so no spoilers, that, I looked through them, they had the scene, and then it said push circle to exit. It would not let me exit. I had to reload my save.
I am so glad you're mentioning this right now in this very discussion.
Oh yeah?
So behind the scenes, I also had this same issue. And I messaged none other than Imran to ask him if he had that problem. And Imran, if I remember correctly, this didn't happen to you, right?
It did not.
Or you don't remember?
I was able, because I'm 99% sure I only did that once, and I looked in at the thing, saw the scene, and backed out.
Yeah, I could do every other button, but except circle.
Yeah, I tried this, no joke, Derek, probably 3 or 4 different times, and I got immensely frustrated because if you have not found weapons, right before this scene, there's an opportunity to buy ones you didn't find. And so I, not having had any issues with the game, bought all these weapons, loaded them up with materia, upgraded them using my skill points, and then had this happen. And so I had to reload my last save where of course I had done none of those things. And I did that twice before I realized, like, this is just a bug for me apparently, and it doesn't work. And so I'm just going to have to buy all this stuff, load right before I get into the vents, and eventually I just skipped them because
that's
I couldn't get them to work.
Yeah, I only tried one for each, and I'm like, nope, if it did happen for this one and it happened for this one, I'm not doing it again. And I've seen at least one other person on Twitter have the same problem. So it's some games have it happen, other games don't, but it's the biggest bug I've seen in the game.
Mm-hmm. I didn't have any of those. I did once have a hard crash when, like, Airbuster was going nuts, and it really did feel like, okay, the PS4 has had enough. It will not... You could just feel it dying and just crash out of the OS.
Fortunately, did not have that happen. No hard crashes, because I didn't save that often. Although it is nice that you could just basically save anywhere.
You can, you can save anywhere, and it's a pretty generous autosave, but you do tend to lose some things if you're just relying solely on autosave, so I would definitely put some manuals here and there.
I think the only thing we haven't really talked about, and there really isn't much to say other than how fantastic it is the music.
Oh, and God, yeah.
Dear God.
Oh. The first time that I heard the battle theme kick on, like their remixed version of it, I knew this was special. Like, I want this soundtrack on iTunes or Spotify or something. Because, man, playing through in this new system with that battle theme playing in the background, it just felt amazing. Like I can't even describe how much I love every single track that I've heard in this game. Like, they hit just so perfectly.
There's one boss towards the end whose name I don't want to use, but they have a very famous theme, and then, like, most of the boss battle is like a very slow, like, orchestrated version of their theme, but the last 10th of the boss battle is like the old theme, but like kicked to 11, and it sounds so amazing. It's one of the best tracks in the game.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
absolutely.
There is so many moments that really hype you up, and even some smaller songs. Like, I love Aerith's theme, Tifa's theme, the new Hip Hop to Chocobo. Fantastic. I love it.
the new track, it's the new title track they, like, commissioned for the game, but, like, they have just a guitar version of it in Sector 5 slums that just sounds so good. Like, it sounds like Last of Us music, honestly.
Yeah, I got that feeling a few times where it just felt like Last of Us, which felt kind of fitting in a way, just because of how downtrodden everything is. It really does succeed in setting that mood, and I don't know why, but one of the most memorable sections for me, and it might be the music, might just because of how big the moment was, or like that you're building up to, but fighting through the parking garage in the Shinra building, loved it. I think all those elements helped to really combine, especially because you're fighting third-class soldiers and all these other enemies. It really felt like, oh, we're storming the castle now.
Yeah. They did a good job of, like, because the original Shinra options were storm through the front door, use the elevator, or take the back, like, stairs. So they did a good job of, like, combining storm through the front door and also other things. Mm-hmm. So then give you that choice. But one sound design thing that I don't think gets enough credit, and I really want to call it out, is when a character has dialogue, it could be you or the boss characters or whatever, during battle, and you open up the menu, they have a distorted slowed down effect. And it makes it feel like you're actually stopping and, like, analyzing the situation in a way that gives you a breather. And it's one of those things that just most people wouldn't notice, but everyone will appreciate in a way of making them feel more... makes them popping up the menu make you feel more analytical. Which is, like, yeah, it's one of those, like, sound designers do an amazing job, and this is one of the pieces of proof of it.
That's right up there for me with Spider-Man PS4's, the way they recorded
athletic
strenuous
lines
voice track.
Yeah,
an athletic voice track and a one that's at rest. I love the way Spider-Man handled that. This is kind of up there for me in terms of just the fact that a lot of games, when you pop into a menu, they'll just, treat dialogue like it's still happening in real time. So it's really cool to give the sense that time is slowing around you.
Mm-hmm. And also, the characters are far away. It'll be treated as if it's far away, and it'll get louder as you get closer. Like, the sound design really is brilliant. All the just sound effects and spells and just everything has this good feel that just makes you really in the action. Like I said, I don't know if it'll reach the upper echelon of all games for me, but it's certainly Game of the Year material right now. Like, I can't imagine anything else supplanting it.
Honestly, like, Cyberpunk, Last of Us, those games are kind of on notice for me right now. So, like, they really have to knock it out of the park if they want to be better than this for me.
I was really, really hyped for Cyberpunk. And for me, that Last of Us 2 and this were kind of in contention already in my mind, even though I'd only played one of the three. But I do have a feeling that this just sets a really high bar for this year. And Cyberpunk and Last of Us 2 have their work cut out for them. I don't know how they can overcome this, because you have a game that builds upon one of the greatest of all time in a way that it still feels like a new thing that stands on its own while respecting the legacy of the game it's portraying. So it's really hard, because Cyberpunk just doesn't have that history, and Last of Us 2 is gonna be good. I'm certain it'll be good, but I just don't know how you overcome something like Final Fantasy. It's just such a huge game, and it's really, really hard after seeing just how well Square has nailed this.
I think the longer legacy of this game is we're gonna be talking about this game like Metal Gear Solid 2 in like 5 to 10 years, of it being incredibly divisive, and depending on how it sticks future things, like whether or not this was the beginning of the end, or like the beginning of something totally, like a revitalization of the Final Fantasy brand.
Yeah, it really could prove to be that revitalization, because 14 definitely has that aspect, but that's online. Not everybody gets involved with that, so it kind of counts, but also not really. So having something like this solid of a single player game, probably the first really solid single player Final Fantasy since what, 12, maybe even 10.
I would say so. I'd put it there.
Yeah, it just depends on your preferences, but it really is that good. But again, it's only one piece of that puzzle, and how that rest of the puzzle is handled is going to maybe retroactively sit, or it could just be one of those things like, okay, this first part is really good, stick with that. Don't bother with the others, which could also be feasible, but I think we'll get more into that when we get to our spoiler discussion. But otherwise, is there anything else that you guys wanted to bring up that we haven't mentioned yet?
Small thing. If you have the physical game, and this is just silly, but I'm a big fan of packaging and stuff like that. If you have the physical game, they did such a good job of making it look like the PS1 original. Like the disc itself is just white with Final Fantasy VII Disc 1, because it comes on 2 discs, which I didn't know.
Oh, wow.
And the cover, is just Cloud standing in front of the Shinra building against a white background. Or, sorry, a Mako reactor in front of a white background. It looks incredible. Like, it's just such a... It's so nice to see the two of them sitting next to each other. So if you haven't purchased and you're a collector, I definitely recommend getting physical.
Yeah, I ended up canceling my physical order because they sent me the retail code earlier than I thought they would. But now I kind of just want to get it for the box, just to have it and be like, okay, yeah, I want to support this game that I ended up really loving.
Yeah, same way. I know it's sold out all over the place right now, so I have to wait a little bit, but that's not a huge deal. I can, I played it, so it's not like I have to wait as hard. But I do eventually want to get it physical. Where's this? I wonder what a split is where the disc ends. I mean, I guess you could just do the first 9 chapters, the last 9 chapters if you want.
I think it's like
way.
Red Dead, where one's only an installation disc, or they're both only installation discs, but one is only there for verification.
Right.
Yeah, one is marked as a install disc, and one is marked as a play disc.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
The small thing I want to mention is that I was kind of wondering what other Final Fantasy stuff, and there's a couple of references here and there to other Final Fantasy media. The weirdest one to me is they brought in Kyrie, who is a character from a Japanese-only novel called The Kids Are All Right, about the Turks. And that's like the only other appearance she makes.
I was wondering why they kept making like this big deal about this Kyrie. Like, where did this chick come from?
I wonder if they're putting her in more stuff. But yeah, like if you go through the game and you see Kyrie and you're like, well, who the heck is that? That's it. She's apparently just from a surprisingly popular light novel. That
is one other interesting thing, and we can get into it more in the spoiler chat. But for the most part, this does consider Before Crisis and Crisis Core canon. It feels.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's notable. At first, I wonder if they also was like making hints towards Dirge of Cerberus, but it turns out no. Which
I mean, we haven't unlocked Vincent yet. It's always possible that we'll see more of that stuff in the future.
That is true. But there was one reference that was like, oh, are they really mentioning what I think they're mentioning? But then it was like, oh no, it's something different. All right. Well, I think that covers it for our Final Fantasy VII Remake post-review discussion. That's spoiler-free. So thank you for watching. And if you like this video, be sure to like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameExplain. And Imran, where can they find you at?
They can find me on Twitter at Imran, IMRANZOMG, and they can also find me on Twitch at the same username. You can also find me usually on Kind of Funny Games stuff, which is Kind of Funny Games on YouTube.
Very cool. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Game Explained for more on Final Fantasy, including our spoiler-filled discussion where we're just going to blow out this story, and other things gaming as well. Until next time, bye.